The gunshot echoed across the dusty Montana prairie as Lillian Keller stumbled back from the fresh grave, her trembling fingers clutching a worn photograph of her late husband. The year was 1879, and at 28 years old, she found herself a widow with 3 children to raise and nowhere to call home. A fierce wind whipped across the cemetery, scattering wildflowers over the freshly turned earth as she squared her shoulders, knowing that tears would have to wait. There was no time for grieving when survival hung in the balance. "Mama, I'm cold," whispered Emma, her eldest at 9 years old, tugging at Lillian's black morning dress. Behind her stood Daniel, a solemn 6-year-old boy clutching his younger sister Sarah's hand, the 4-year-old's eyes wide with confusion. "I know, darling," Lillian said, her voice steady despite the hurricane of fear inside her. "We're leaving today." The 4-room house they'd called home for the past 3 years now belonged to the bank. James Keller had fallen from his horse while working cattle, his neck broken instantly. With his death came the brutal revelation of debts Lillian never knew existed. The banker had given her 2 weeks to vacate a courtesy, he'd called it, his eyes already measuring the property for its next inhabitants. That morning, Lillian had sold nearly everything they owned, keeping only what would fit in their wagon clothes, a few cooking utensils, James's rifle, some tools, and the children's most treasured possessions. The remainder of their money went toward purchasing train tickets to Prairie Ridge, a growing settlement where her cousin had once mentioned work might be found. "Where are we going, Mama?" Daniel asked as they left the cemetery, his voice so much like his father's it made Lillian's heart clench. "To find a new home," she answered, praying she wasn't lying to them. The train journey westward stretched for 3 days. Lillian watched the landscape change through grimy windows as her children slept against her, their small bodies pressed together for comfort. Forests gave way to rolling plains, then to stretches of rugged country dotted with scrubby pine and juniper. With each mile, she rehearsed what she would say to potential employers, calculating how long their meager savings might last. Prairie Ridge appeared on the horizon like a scattered collection of matchboxes, so unlike the bustling town her cousin had described in his letters. As they stepped onto the platform, Lillian felt her stomach sink. The main street was little more than a dusty road lined with basic necessities: a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, and what appeared to be a makeshift schoolhouse. "It's not much," Emma observed quietly. "But it's a beginning," Lillian replied, adjusting Sarah on her hip. The hotel owner, a weathered woman named Mrs. Prescott, regarded Lillian's children with suspicion when she inquired about a room. "Children are noisy," the woman sniffed, "and we have paying customers who expect peace." "They'll be quiet as mice," Lillian promised, feeling Daniel press closer to her skirts. Mrs. Prescott's eyes softened marginally. "One night. You can have one night while you sort yourself out." That night, as her children slept in the cramped room, Lillian sat by the window, staring out at the unfamiliar stars. James had always been the dreamer in their marriage, convincing her that prosperity was just around the corner. Now she was alone with 3 children to feed in a town that already seemed reluctant to welcome them. Morning brought a fruitless search for work. The general store had no positions available, the school teacher was firmly established, and the saloon was no place for a respectable widow. By midday, Lillian stood outside the town's small newspaper office, her last hope before she would be forced to move on. "I can read and write well," she told the editor, a balding man with ink-stained fingers. "I can keep accounts and I learn quickly." The man shook his head. "Don't need help." "Town's barely supporting what we've got." As she turned to leave, he called after her. "Try Ambrose Vale's ranch, 5 miles north. Lost his housekeeper last month. Man can't cook to save his life, but he's fair to those who work for him." Lillian thanked him, hope flickering faintly. That afternoon, she used the last of their money to hire a wagon driver to take them to the Vale Ranch. As they bounced along the rutted road, Sarah began to cry from hunger, and Lillian felt her resolve wavering. What if this rancher turned them away too? The Vale Ranch appeared suddenly around a bend, a sturdy 2-story house with a wide porch, flanked by a barn and several outbuildings. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the sound of hammering could be heard from somewhere behind the main structure. "This is as far as I go," the driver announced, helping them down. "Good luck to you, madam." Lillian gathered her children and their single trunk of possessions, approaching the house with determined steps. Before she could knock, the door swung open, revealing a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice deep but not unkind. "Mr. Vale." Lillian straightened her spine. "I'm Lillian Keller. I heard you might be in need of a housekeeper." His gaze swept over her, then to the three children standing quietly behind her. "I need a housekeeper, not a nursery." "My children are well behaved," Lillian said quickly. "Emma is old enough to help with chores. They won't be a burden." Ambrose Vale crossed his arms, leaning against the doorframe. At 33, he had the lean, hardened look of a man who'd spent his life outdoors. His ranch was growing, prosperous enough to employ 4 ranch hands and, until recently, a housekeeper. Mrs. Keller, running a ranch is dangerous work, no place for little ones. "Mr. Vale," Lillian met his eyes directly. "I bring 3 children." Something shifted in his expression, perhaps recognition of the desperation she was trying so hard to conceal. "Bring their laughter and stay," he said after a long pause. "Everyone could use more laughter around here, but there are conditions." Relief weakened Lillian's knees. "Name them. You'll cook, clean, and manage the house. Your girl can help if she's able, but the little ones stay clear of the corrals and the work areas. There's a small cabin behind the house, used to be the foreman's before I built him a new one. It's nothing fancy, but it'll give you privacy." "That sounds more than fair." "There's one more thing," Ambrose added, his expression serious. "This arrangement is probationary, 2 weeks. If it doesn't work out, you'll need to move on." Lillian nodded. 2 weeks is all I need to prove our worth." That evening, after settling the children in the simple 2-room cabin, Lillian walked to the main house to prepare supper for Ambrose and his ranch hands. The kitchen was well equipped but showed signs of neglect: unwashed dishes piled in the sink, flour scattered across countertops, and a burnt pot soaking in cloudy water. "Sorry about the mess," Ambrose said from the doorway, making her jump. "Been fending for ourselves since Mrs. Whittaker left." "It's nothing that can't be fixed," she assured him, rolling up her sleeves. By the time the ranch hands came in from their day's work, Lillian had prepared a simple but hearty meal of beef stew, cornbread, and stewed apples she'd found in the pantry. The men, Miguel, Tom, Hank, and Caleb, the young foreman, eyed her curiously as they washed up at the pump outside. "Miss Lillian will be taking over housekeeping duties," Ambrose announced as they sat at the long table. "She and her children will be staying in the old foreman's cabin." The men exchanged glances but welcomed her politely. As they ate, complimenting her cooking with genuine enthusiasm, Lillian caught Ambrose watching her. There was something in his gaze she couldn't quite identify, not pity, which she'd grown accustomed to since James's death, but something more complex. Days fell into a rhythm. Lillian rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, then returned to the cabin to get her children ready for the day. Emma quickly became her assistant, proud to be trusted with simple tasks like setting the table or gathering eggs from the henhouse. Daniel explored every inch of the permitted areas of the ranch, fascinated by the tools and animals. Little Sarah followed her brother everywhere, collecting treasures: colorful stones, feathers, and wildflowers that she presented to Ambrose each evening with solemn ceremony. "Another gift, Miss Sarah?" he would ask, accepting each offering with the gravity it deserved. "I shall have to find a special place for this one." And he did. Lillian discovered a shelf in his study where each of Sarah's treasures was carefully arranged. On the 5th day, Lillian was kneading bread dough when Emma burst into the kitchen, breathless with excitement. "Mama, Mr. Vale is teaching Daniel to ride." Alarmed, Lillian wiped her hands and hurried outside to find Ambrose leading a gentle pony in slow circles around the yard. Daniel sat atop the animal, his face split with a grin of pure joy, the first real smile she'd seen from him since his father died. "He said he wanted to learn," Ambrose explained as she approached. "Thought it might be good for him." "I'm careful, Mama," Daniel called. Mr. Vale showed me how to hold on proper. Watching her son's happiness, Lillian couldn't bring herself to object. Thank you, she said quietly to Ambrose. He needs this. Boy his age should know how to ride, Ambrose replied, his eyes on Daniel. His pa teach him anything before. James was often away working other ranches, Lillian said, the old pain surfacing. There wasn't much time. Ambrose nodded, understanding in his silence. That evening, after the children were asleep, Lillian sat on the cabin's small porch, mending one of Daniel's shirts by lantern light. The sound of boots on the path made her look up to find Ambrose approaching, a book tucked under his arm. "Evening, Mrs. Keller," he said, stopping at the bottom step. "Hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," she replied, setting aside her sewing. "Is something needed at the house?" He shook his head. "Just thought your girl might like this." He held out the book, a collection of adventure stories. "Found it in town today. My mother used to read these to me when I was about her age." The unexpected kindness caught Lillian off guard. "That's very thoughtful. Emma loves stories." "Daniel's a natural on horseback," Ambrose said, changing the subject. "Thought I might teach him more if you don't object." "I'd be grateful," Lillian said. "He needs a man's guidance." A comfortable silence fell between them. In the distance, an owl called and the soft nickering of horses carried from the barn. "If you don't mind my asking," Ambrose said finally, "what brought you to Prairie Ridge?" Lillian considered deflecting the question, but found herself wanting to answer honestly. "Necessity. My husband died 3 months ago. The bank took our house and there was nowhere else to go. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you." She looked up at the stars, remembering how James had once named constellations for the children. "It hasn't been easy for them. They're still adjusting." "They're good children," Ambrose said. "You've done well with them." "Some days I wonder if I'm doing anything right," she admitted, surprising herself with her candor. Ambrose leaned against the porch railing. "My father died when I was 14. Mother raised me alone after that." She always worried she wasn't enough, but she was. Sometimes being enough is all that matters. With that, he bid her good night and disappeared into the darkness. Lillian sat for a long time after he left, turning his words over in her mind. Being enough. Perhaps that was all she could hope for now. The days continued to unfold. Lillian transformed the main house, bringing order to rooms long neglected. The pantry was organized, curtains washed and mended, floors scrubbed until they gleamed. The ranch hands began lingering at the table after meals, enjoying the home-cooked food and the cheerful atmosphere she created. Ambrose's promise to Daniel evolved into daily riding lessons. Soon the boy was confidently trotting around the corral on his own, calling out to his mother to watch his newest accomplishment. Emma discovered the ranch's small library and spent hours reading to Sarah while Lillian worked. And Sarah, who had been so quiet since her father's death, began to chatter and sing again. 10 days into their stay, a violent storm swept across the ranch. Rain hammered the cabin roof as lightning split the sky, sending Sarah diving under her blankets in terror. Daniel pretended bravery while inching closer to his mother, and Emma read aloud, her voice raised to compete with the thunder. A sharp knock on the door startled them all. Ambrose stood on the threshold, rain streaming from his hat brim. "Creek's rising," he said grimly. "Cabin's too close to the bank. You need to move to the main house until the storm passes." They hurriedly gathered blankets and a change of clothes. Ambrose carried Sarah wrapped in a quilt, while Lillian and the older children struggled through the downpour to the main house. Inside, the warmth of the fire and the solid walls offered immediate comfort. "You'll stay in the guest rooms upstairs," Ambrose said, leading them up. "Should be safe enough here." As the children settled into their temporary quarters, Lillian noticed Ambrose preparing to go back out into the storm. "Where are you going?" she asked, alarmed. "Horses," he replied simply. "Can't leave them in the lower pasture with the creek rising. You can't go alone in this weather." His expression softened. "Done it before. Don't worry about me." Hours passed with no sign of him or the ranch hands. The children eventually fell asleep, but Lillian kept vigil at the window, watching lightning illuminate the ranch yard in ghastly flashes. Finally, past midnight, she saw figures emerging from the darkness, the ranch hands leading horses toward the barn. Ambrose was the last to enter the house, soaked to the skin and mud splattered. His face was drawn with exhaustion as he hung his dripping coat by the door. "You're still up," he observed, seeing Lillian by the fire. "I was worried," she admitted, rising to pour him coffee from the pot she'd kept warm. He accepted the cup gratefully, his cold fingers brushing against hers. "Didn't mean to cause concern." "Had to move the herd to higher ground and secure the barn." "Are the animals safe?" He nodded. "Safe as they can be, might lose some fencing, but that can be repaired." Lillian noticed he was shivering despite his proximity to the fire. Without thinking, she reached for the blanket on the nearby chair and draped it around his shoulders. The gesture seemed to surprise them both. It was the first time she'd touched him voluntarily. "Thank you," he said quietly. They sat in companionable silence, listening to the storm's fury gradually diminishing. Lillian found herself studying his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the small scar near his temple, the way his eyes reflected the firelight. "Why did you let us stay?" she asked suddenly. "You didn't need the complications we bring." Ambrose stared into the fire for so long she thought he might not answer. "I recognized something in you," he said finally. "My mother had that same look when my father died, determined to survive no matter what. Besides," he added with the ghost of a smile, "your children remind me that there's more to life than cattle and crops." Morning revealed the storm's damage, downed trees, scattered debris, and the creek's swollen well beyond its banks. The cabin had water up to its doorstep, confirming Ambrose's wisdom in moving them to the main house. "You'll stay here until the water recedes," he told Lillian over breakfast. "Might be a few days." Those few days stretched into a week as more rain fell, keeping the creek dangerously high. The forced proximity changed the dynamic between Lillian and Ambrose. Working side by side to maintain the house, their conversations grew longer, more personal. She learned about his childhood in Missouri, his journey west as a young man, and his dreams for the ranch. In turn, she told him about growing up in Pennsylvania, meeting James at a church social, and their early happy years together. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the children play with the ranch dog, Ambrose broached a subject Lillian had been avoiding. "Your 2 weeks are up," he said, his voice carefully neutral. Lillian's heart sank. She'd been so caught up in the rhythm of life at the ranch that she'd almost forgotten their arrangement was temporary. "I understand," she said, struggling to maintain her composure. "Once the creek goes down, we'll make arrangements to leave." "That's not what I meant," Ambrose said quickly. "I'm saying the probationary period is over. As far as I'm concerned, the position is yours permanently if you want it." Relief washed over her. "We'd like to stay very much." "Good," he said simply, but she caught the smile he tried to hide. When the creek finally returned to its banks, Ambrose and the hands helped repair the cabin. Lillian and the children moved back in, their few possessions now augmented by items Ambrose had provided: new blankets, a rocking chair for the porch, and books for all 3 children. Summer arrived with long, golden days. Daniel grew confident enough to help with small chores around the ranch, proudly riding his pony alongside Ambrose during daily inspections of the property. Emma discovered a talent for gardening, coaxing vegetables from the plot behind the main house that had long been neglected. Sarah collected more treasures and charmed everyone with her increasingly elaborate stories. And Lillian found herself watching for Ambrose's return each evening, her heart quickening at the sight of him crossing the yard toward the house. It happened so gradually that she couldn't pinpoint when her feelings began to change. Perhaps it was the way he listened when she spoke, giving her words the same serious consideration he gave to business matters. Or maybe it was how he treated her children with respect and genuine affection, never as burdens to be tolerated. The first time he called her Lily, instead of Mrs. Keller, was during a warm July evening. The children were chasing fireflies near the cabin while Lillian and Ambrose sat on the main house porch, discussing plans for preserving the summer's bounty. "You've transformed this place, Lily," he said, the nickname slipping out naturally. Then, realizing what he'd done, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Keller." "That was presumptuous." "No," she said softly, "I like it. James always called me Lillian." Something shifted between them that night, a barrier lowered, a possibility acknowledged. August brought the county fair to Prairie Ridge. Ambrose insisted on taking them all, loading the entire family into the wagon for the day-long excursion. The children were wild with excitement, never having experienced such an event before. The fairgrounds buzzed with activity, livestock exhibitions, handicraft displays, games, and food stalls filling the air with enticing aromas. Daniel raced ahead to see the prize bull, while Emma gravitated toward the quilting display. Sarah, perched on Ambrose's shoulders, pointed excitedly at everything that caught her eye. "Look, Mr. Vale," she squealed. "Ponies like Daniel's." Lillian watched them together, Ambrose's strong hands holding Sarah securely as he narrated the sights for her. Something warm unfurled in her chest, not just gratitude, but a deeper emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel for a very long time. As the day progressed, they moved through the fair as a unit, looking for all the world like a family. More than once, Lillian caught curious glances from townspeople who clearly wondered about their relationship. To her surprise, she found she didn't mind their speculation. They were watching a horse race when Emma tugged at Lillian's sleeve. "Mama, people think Mr. Vale is our pa," she whispered. "Mrs. Prescott from the hotel asked me if he was our stepfather yet." Heat rushed to Lillian's cheeks. "What did you tell her?" "I said no, but Daniel says he wishes he was." Emma's eyes were serious. "Would that be bad, Mama?" "If Mr. Vale wanted to be our new pa." Before Lillian could formulate a response, Ambrose returned with lemonade for everyone, and the moment passed. But Emma's question lingered in her mind throughout the afternoon. That evening, as they drove home with 3 exhausted children dozing in the back of the wagon, Ambrose glanced at Lillian. "You're quiet," he observed. "Didn't you enjoy the fair?" "Very much," she assured him. "I was just thinking about how much has changed since we arrived here." "For the better, I hope. Definitely for the better." She hesitated, then added, "Emma told me something interesting today. Apparently people in town are wondering about our arrangement." Ambrose's hands tightened slightly on the reins. "Does that bother you?" "It should," Lillian admitted. "A proper widow would be concerned about her reputation, but honestly, I find I care less about what others think these days." The wagon rolled along in silence for a moment before Ambrose spoke again. "Lily, there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you." Her heart quickened. "Yes." He cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about adding on to the main house. There's plenty of room to expand the kitchen like you mentioned, and perhaps add another bedroom or 2 upstairs." Though his words were practical, the implication hung in the air between them. "That sounds like a significant undertaking," she said carefully. "It would be one I wouldn't consider without good reason." He glanced at her, then back at the road. "I've grown accustomed to having all of you around, more than accustomed. The thought of the house without your presence, without the children's voices, it doesn't sit well with me." Lillian's pulse raced. "Ambrose, are you saying what I think you're saying?" He pulled the wagon to a stop, turning to face her fully. In the moonlight, his expression was open, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "I'm saying that I care for you, Lily, for all of you. I know it hasn't been long since you lost your husband, and I respect that grief takes time. But I want you to know that if you're ready, I'd like us to be more than employer and housekeeper." Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness but from the unexpected joy of hearing words she'd secretly longed for. "The children adore you," she whispered. "And I them," he replied. "But it's their mother I've fallen in love with." Lillian's breath caught at his directness. "I think I've been falling in love with you too," she confessed. "I just didn't know if I had the right to feel this way again so soon." Ambrose took her hand, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "There's no timetable for the heart, Lily, but I can wait however long you need." They resumed the journey home, hands still joined between them, the future suddenly bright with possibility. Autumn painted the landscape in amber and gold. Ambrose began work on the house expansion, employing additional men from town to speed the process. Lillian found herself included in every decision: the size of the kitchen windows, the placement of the new bedrooms, the style of the extended porch. "It will be your home too," Ambrose told her when she protested that her opinion wasn't necessary. "You should have it the way you want it." The children threw themselves into ranch life with growing confidence. Daniel, now 7, proudly helped with the fall roundup, riding alongside the men to bring cattle in from distant pastures. Emma took charge of harvesting the garden's bounty, organizing the root cellar with a precision that impressed even Caleb, the meticulous foreman. And Sarah, approaching her 5th birthday, appointed herself official greeter to any visitors, charming everyone with her newfound sociability. One crisp October morning, Lillian was hanging laundry when she spotted a rider approaching Mrs. Prescott from the hotel, an unexpected visitor. "Good day, Mrs. Keller," the older woman called, dismounting stiffly. "Hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Lillian replied, wondering what could have brought the hotel owner all the way out to the ranch. Mrs. Prescott got straight to the point. "Town council's looking for a teacher. Our last one left to get married, and we've got 20 children with no schooling. Heard your girl Emma mention you used to teach before you were married." Lillian hadn't considered returning to teaching since James's death. "That was many years ago, Mrs. Prescott." "Knowledge doesn't spoil," the woman replied pragmatically. "It would just be 3 days a week, mind you. We can't afford more, but it pays, and it would do the town good to have someone respectable in the position." That evening, Lillian discussed the offer with Ambrose as they sat by the fire after the children had gone to bed. "What do you think?" she asked, uncertain. "It would mean being away from the ranch 3 days a week." "I think you should do it if you want to," Ambrose said without hesitation. "The house won't fall apart without you for a few hours, and you've always said you enjoyed teaching." "What about the children? Emma and Daniel could go with you. They need proper schooling anyway. Sarah can stay here with me on school days. She's good company in the office when I'm doing paperwork." The casual way he incorporated her children into his life never failed to move her. There was no distinction in his mind between his responsibilities and theirs. They were simply family. "There's one other consideration," Lillian said hesitantly. "Taking a position in town might cause more talk about our situation." Ambrose leaned forward, taking her hands in his. "Lily, I've been patient because I know you needed time. But I'm not ashamed of what I feel for you, and I don't want to hide it. If you're worried about propriety, there's a simple solution." Her heart stuttered. "What solution?" "Marry me," he said simply. "Not because of what people might say, but because I love you. Because I want to be a father to your children, and because I want to build a life with you." Tears filled Lillian's eyes. "You make it sound so straightforward. Isn't it? We love each other. The children are happy here. What's left to consider when you put it that way?" She smiled through her tears. "Yes, Ambrose, yes, I'll marry you." His kiss was gentle yet full of promise, a pledge of all the days to come. They were married in the town church 2 weeks later with the entire community in attendance. Emma served as Lillian's maid of honor, while Daniel proudly stood beside Ambrose as his best man. Sarah scattered wildflower petals down the aisle, beaming at the assembled guests. "Do you, Ambrose Jonathan Vale, take Lillian Marie Keller to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the minister asked. "I do," Ambrose replied, his voice steady and sure. "And do you, Lillian Marie Keller, take Ambrose Jonathan Vale to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," she answered, marveling at how right the words felt. After the ceremony, the celebration moved to the ranch, where tables had been set up in the yard. Ranch hands and townspeople mingled, sharing food and stories as the sun set behind the mountains. Children played tag among the trees, their laughter carrying on the crisp autumn air. As twilight descended, Ambrose found Lillian watching Daniel teaching some town children how to throw a lasso. "Happy, Mrs. Vale?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. The new name sent a thrill through her. "Happier than I ever thought possible again," she admitted, leaning into his embrace. "When James died, I thought our lives were over. I never imagined we'd find this. When you showed up on my doorstep with 3 children in tow, I never imagined my life was just beginning," Ambrose replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Best decision I ever made, telling you to bring your children and stay." That night, after the guests had departed and the children were tucked into their beds in the newly expanded house, Lillian and Ambrose stood on the porch, gazing at the star-filled sky. "Do you remember what you said that first day?" Lillian asked. About bringing their laughter, Ambrose nodded. This place was too quiet before you came, too empty. And now it's home, he said simply, for all of us. Winter blanketed the ranch in pristine white, transforming the landscape into a wonderland that delighted the children. Ambrose built them a sled, and weekend afternoons were spent racing down the gentle slope behind the barn, cheeks flushed with cold and excitement. In the evenings, they gathered around the hearth, reading stories or playing games while snow tapped softly against the windows. Lillian's teaching position brought unexpected satisfaction. 3 days a week, she and the older children rode into town, where she guided 20 eager students through reading, arithmetic, and history. Emma and Daniel thrived in the classroom setting, making friends and excelling in their studies. On school days, Ambrose kept Sarah with him, teaching her to recognize cattle brands and letting her help with his account books. The little girl blossomed under his attention, her vocabulary expanding impressively as she absorbed his patient explanations of ranch operations. "Papa Brose says I'm a natural rancheress," she announced one evening at dinner, causing milk to spray from Daniel's nose as he laughed. It was the first time any of the children had called Ambrose Papa, even with the childish modification. The table fell silent as the adults exchanged glances. "Well," Ambrose said carefully, "he's right, you are a natural." Sarah beamed, unaware of the significance of her words, but Daniel and Emma watched Lillian's reaction closely. "Is it all right if we call him Pa now?" Daniel asked that night as Lillian tucked him into bed. "Since he's married to you and all, if that's what you want," Lillian said, smoothing his hair from his forehead. "Ambrose would be honored, I'm sure." "He doesn't try to make us forget Pa," Emma observed from her bed across the room. "Some of the kids at school said their new stepfathers don't like them talking about their real fathers." "Ambrose isn't like that," Lillian assured them. "He knows your father will always be important to you." The truth of her words was evident in the small memorial shelf Ambrose had built in the children's bedroom, a place for James's photograph and the few mementos they had of him. "A man should be remembered by his children," he'd said when he presented it to them. Spring arrived with its promise of renewal. The ranch thrived under Ambrose's careful management, and the expanded house truly felt like home. Lillian's days were full teaching, managing the household and loving her growing family. One morning in April, as dawn broke over the eastern hills, Lillian stood at their bedroom window, watching the first golden light touch the awakening land. Behind her, Ambrose stirred in bed. "You're up early," he murmured, his voice still rough with sleep. She turned to him, her hand resting on her stomach. "I have news." His eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Lily, are you certain?" She nodded, joy and nervousness mingling inside her. "The doctor confirmed it yesterday when I was in town. We're having a baby in November." Ambrose was out of bed in an instant, gathering her in his arms with reverent care. "A baby," he breathed against her hair. "Our baby. Are you happy?" she asked, though his reaction left little doubt. "Beyond words," he assured her, then hesitated. "How do you feel? Is it too soon after?" "After losing James," she shook her head. "Life goes on, Ambrose. This baby is part of our new beginning, not an ending of anything." They told the children that evening over dinner, uncertain how they would react to the news of a sibling. Will it be a boy or a girl? Was Daniel's first question. "We won't know until the baby arrives," Ambrose explained. "Can I help take care of it?" Emma asked, her expression serious. "We'll need all the help we can get," Lillian assured her. Sarah considered the news with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Where will the baby sleep?" "In our room at first," Ambrose said, "and then maybe with you when it's older if you wouldn't mind sharing." "I wouldn't mind," Sarah declared magnanimously. "I could tell it stories." Their acceptance was immediate and complete, reminding Lillian once again of how resilient children could be when surrounded by love and security. As Lillian's body changed with the growing child, Ambrose's attentiveness increased. He insisted on hiring a woman from town to help with the heavier housework, arranged for a substitute teacher for days when Lillian felt unwell, and rearranged his office to include a comfortable settee where she could rest while keeping him company. "You're fussing too much," she told him one afternoon as he adjusted pillows behind her back. "I'm entitled to fuss over my wife and child," he replied unapologetically. The tenderness in his eyes made her reach for his hand. "I never expected to find this kind of happiness again," she admitted. "When I arrived here, I was just hoping for shelter and work. And I was just hoping for someone who could cook a decent meal," he teased. "Instead, I got a family." Summer passed in a haze of contentment. The children spent their days exploring the ranch, swimming in the creek, and helping with age-appropriate chores. Lillian's pregnancy progressed smoothly, her body rounding as the baby grew within her. In late October, as the aspens turned golden and the air carried the first hint of winter, Ambrose completed the nursery, a small room adjacent to their bedroom, painted in soft yellow with a hand-carved crib he'd worked on secretly for months. "It's beautiful," Lillian whispered, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "Did you make this yourself?" "With some help from Caleb," Ambrose admitted. "He's better with the detailed carving than I am." The crib's headboard featured intricate patterns of leaves and flowers, with 4 names carved beneath: Emma, Daniel, Sarah, and a blank space for the new baby. "All our children," Ambrose explained, seeing her trace the names. "Equal in our hearts." 2 weeks later, in the middle of a clear, cold night, Lillian woke to the familiar tightening of her body. "Ambrose," she whispered, touching his shoulder. "It's time." The next hours passed in a blur of pain and effort. The midwife arrived quickly, and Emma took charge of her younger siblings, keeping them occupied in the front room while Lillian labored upstairs. Ambrose refused to leave her side, holding her hand through each contraction, wiping her brow and murmuring encouragement when her strength faltered. As dawn broke over the ranch, a lusty cry announced the arrival of their daughter, a robust baby with a shock of dark hair and her father's storm-gray eyes. "She's perfect," Ambrose breathed, cradling her with reverent hands. "Just like her mother." They named her Grace Hope Vale, a testament to the unexpected blessings that had brought them together. When the older children were allowed in to meet their new sister, their reactions were everything the parents had hoped for: wonder, love, and immediate acceptance. "She's so tiny," Daniel marveled, carefully touching her miniature fingers. "She has Papa's eyes," Emma observed, already showing the protective instincts of an older sister. Sarah, now 5, climbed onto the bed beside Lillian. "I'll teach her all about treasures," she promised solemnly. Watching his family gathered around the newest member, Ambrose felt his chest tighten with emotion. From the window came the sound of ranch life, continuing men calling to each other as they began the day's work, horses nickering in the morning air, the distant lowing of cattle. Inside this room was everything that gave that work meaning. "I never dreamed of this," he said quietly to Lillian as the children took turns holding the baby under her watchful eye. "A house full of laughter, children who call me Pa, a woman who loves me, a daughter of my own." Lillian reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "And I never imagined that arriving desperate at a stranger's door would lead to so much joy." 5 years later, the Vale Ranch had nearly doubled in size. Prosperity had come through Ambrose's careful management and favorable cattle markets. The main house had expanded again to accommodate their growing family. Grace had been joined by a brother, Thomas James Vale, now 3 years old, and determined to do everything his older siblings did. Emma, at 14, showed promise as a writer, filling journals with stories of ranch life and Western adventures. Daniel, 11, had developed into a skilled horseman who dreamed of breeding and training his own stock someday. Sarah, 9, remained the family dreamer, collecting not just physical treasures now but stories and songs from the diverse ranch hands. On a warm spring evening, as the family gathered on the wide porch after dinner, Lillian looked around at the faces she loved her children engaged in various activities. Ambrose rocking baby Thomas on his knee, Grace reading a picture book upside down beside him. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Vale," Ambrose said, noticing her contemplative expression. "I was thinking about journeys," she replied. "How the ones that begin in desperation sometimes lead to the most beautiful destinations." Ambrose nodded, understanding immediately. Like a widow with 3 children arriving at a lonely ranch. and a taciturn rancher who said the most unexpected thing. She smiled at the memory. Bring their laughter and stay. You have no idea how those words saved us, Ambrose. I think you have it backward, Lily, he said, reaching for her hand. You and the children saved me from a life half-lived. You brought light and laughter to a place that had neither. As twilight deepened around them, the sounds of their family filled the air. Emmer reading a poem she'd written. Daniel describing the new foal born that morning. Sarah singing a Spanish lullaby she'd learned from Miguel. Grace's delighted giggles as Thomas tried to clap along. This, Lillian thought, was the true meaning of home, not the buildings or the land, but the love that bound them together. From the ashes of loss, they had built something beautiful and enduring. I love you, she whispered to Ambrose as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. And I you, he replied, the simple words carrying the weight of their shared journey. Forever and always. Around them, the ranch settled into evening rhythms, lanterns glowing in the bunkhouse, horses moving quietly in the corral, the distant howl of a coyote welcoming the night. Inside the circle of their family, past sorrows had transformed into present joys, proving that even the most difficult beginnings could lead to the happiest of endings. For Lillian Keller Vale, who had once stood at a fresh grave with 3 children and nowhere to go, this life was more than she had dared to hope, for it was everything she had never known to dream.